Hi everyone, my name is Elaine Reimann and I want to talk to you today about what I call enhanced collaboration and responsive inquiry. And for many years I've had this niggling idea that won't let me go. I believe that we can greatly enhance the learning that we offer young inquirers today through what I call responsive inquiry. I've been an educator for young learners for many years, over I think 20 years or so now, and I've experienced learning environments in 9 different countries. I'm passionate about teaching and learning, I'm a risk taker, and I love exploring new ideas and things. With my personal studies in early childhood and my qualifications in language acquisitions, I've had the incredible opportunity to work with really great educators from around the world and from many different countries and in many different international schools. In Germany, in France, in Cameroon, in Laos, and most recently in Hong Kong. But let me start with a disclaimer. I am an IBPYP and IBEN educator, and hence my experiences and my personal philosophies is meshed with those values and beliefs about inquiry, about play-based learning, and the responsibility we have as educators of young inquirers to help them become internationally minded and global citizens. However, I'm not here to promote the IB in any way, but I may use some of the language that is commonly used and understood by IBPYP educators. In my travels and schools as an educator and in my experiences, one of the things that keep reoccurring is the idea and understanding of collaboration practices. And to be clear, I mean collaboration and not cooperation. So let me start with a provocation. I'd like to invite you to watch this short video clip. There's no sound to the video clip, just so you're not surprised. And I'd like to ask you to keep your thoughts in mind as well as you watch it, because I'd love to hear some of your ideas about what you see later in our Q&A. But this video is a short glimpse of what collaboration could actually look like. Goal gets me every time. I love this video. I also find that, sport videos or team sports, they really hone that idea of collaboration as well. But what do we see happening here? 3 professional soccer players or football players in some countries, depending where you're from. They are working together using their skills and talents to achieve a shared purpose. This is one of a few key elements of collaboration. The Oxford Dictionary describes collaboration as the action of working with someone to produce or create something. Another definition read, collaboration is the process of 2 or more people, entities, or organizations working together to complete a task or achieve a goal. Our soccer players in the example were doing literally that, working together to achieve a goal. Another definition I read struck my attention because of some key words that stood out to me. In the final sentence, it reads, teams that work collaboratively often access greater resources. And that has also been my experience in teams that I've worked with in the past. Not just the physical resources that one could access, but also the people resources, the talents, the skills, of more adults in the space. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. The other thing that stood out was the word finite resources. And while it's not a finite resource per se, it is a resource, there is a resource that teachers and educators, even leaders, or many people for that matter in different genres of work, complain about not having enough of. Time. We need time for planning, for preparing, for meetings, for meeting preparations, for meeting tasks after the meetings, and God forbid one of our colleagues are away, we also need time to sometimes do double tasks or take on extra loads. However, time shared with a responsive approach to teaching and learning, and the secret ingredients of a mindset and understanding of equitable work ethics, then time will work for you, not against you. In my role as a school leader, I've often observed teams having great planning sessions where ideas are shared, reflections are documented, and learning engagements are planned for the following week. However, teachers then leave those meetings and go back to their classrooms and work on producing their interpretations of the discussion, and often juggle with preparing the intended outcomes alone. Or in some cases, with the privilege of an associate teacher or a teacher assistant or instructional assistant. They cooperate. They cooperate by doing the best they can to keep up with the agreed goals. However, it doesn't have to be that way, and it shouldn't be that way. I believe it doesn't. But to change, that does require a shift in mindset. I've experienced that with what I call responsive inquiry. A responsive inquiry approach combined with enhanced collaboration practices and a solid understanding of equitable work ethics. With that combination, time will be the partner in the process. So, what was my story? Where did it all start for me? Many years ago, during my classroom teaching days, I was in a position that I was told that I would not have the choice to teach the class that I wanted to teach, and I was not keen on what was proposed to me. While not the best motive, this restriction motivated me to dig into research and find out what I could do to solve this dilemma. I looked into multiple age grouping, composite classes, and dug into a better and deeper understanding of collaboration, what that means and what that looks like. So with enough research under my belt, I wrote a proposal to the school to remove the walls between our early years classrooms and combine all the classes. To my surprise, it was approved. A new colleague arrived, and with some adjustments and some growing pains, we worked out how we could run a free-flowing centre. Fast forward a few years, and I moved to a new school. And there, I was privileged to work with a colleague who was even more obsessed with play-based learning and a responsive inquiry approach to learning, or what we called at the time, free flow. Again, after a few discussions and some sharing of ideas, we were able to develop a robust centre and hire excellent like-minded colleagues to work with, and enjoy a few years where we had this advantage of true, what I call enhanced collaboration. We all shared the same mindset. We all shared the same understanding, the understanding of equitable work ethical behaviour. This mindset enabled us to trust. We openly shared ideas. We opened up our classroom doors to all of the students in the centre, and we used each other's classrooms whenever needed. We jumped in when needed. and we supported student inquiries wherever that occurred and whenever a student needed us. We wrote learning stories about any student we engaged with, whether or not they were on our class list or part of our classroom. During meetings, we discussed possible provocations we wanted to set up in our rooms, and along with the connections we were going to make to the learning outcomes we were working on, or the units we were working on at the time. So what if children had access to all the adult strengths and talents in your setting? I would argue that every team larger than 3 people would have several strengths available. And if you're not sure, grab a copy of Strengths Finder 2.0. You may have someone on the team who is strong in literacy or math development, someone who is sensitive to social emotional needs, or someone who is creative with musical, art or drama skills, someone who is great with organization and has great organizational skills. It's always a bonus to have someone who is good in technology. I know that this thought comes with a lot of buts. But what about relationship building? What about bonding with the students? What about relationship building with the parents? Parents need a go-to person who will admin reference in case of an emergency. What about report writing? And what about XYZ? Who is responsible? What can I say? Where there is a will, there is a way. If you want responsive inquiry to work in your context, you can make it happen. It might not look the same. It might not be a whole day program. Maybe just 1 day a week or a few hours a day. Depending on the size of your school and the classes, you might combine only 2 or 3 classes only. What is important is, as a team, you develop a shared understanding of the philosophy. Know your experts and incorporate current research practices. Be strategic and intentional with your time. Identify strengths and skills and leverage them. Have a shared understanding of equitable work ethical behavior. And first and foremost, communicate. Some of the key characteristics of an enhanced collaborative team, in my experience, were that we acknowledged that we all come to the team with unique skills and talents to share. We developed a culture of trust and opened the doors. We allowed access to all of the adults and skills, talents, and we were proactive about learning what we could about all the students, and we welcomed their inquiries. Intentional and regular meetings were set to ensure conversations were held about every child, and we got multiple adult perspectives on every child's development. We could ensure that every child had regular documentation and students gained responses to their learning needs. Another great advantage was that we were able to relieve each other in circumstances, situations where a colleague had to be absent or someone had to step out of the room. The students knew us all, and so there was no problem in subbing or supporting a classroom or any child for any given issue. Don't just take my word for it. I hope I've inspired you to rethink your collaborative practices. Do you work in a culture that truly collaborates? Or is it more cooperation? I look forward to our Q&A session, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much, Elaine. That was a lot of food for thought in there. And as we're waiting for the questions to start coming in and for people to put their hands up, I just want to say that I've worked in schools that have had closed door policies where teachers go into their room and close the door. And I've worked in schools with full free flow and collaboration. And as a teacher, I have grown so much more in a collaborative environment and felt, so much better at people coming to me saying, oh, you're good at this, can you do that? And me being able to go to another teacher and say, oh, I can't do this, help me out here. And you just grow so much more as an educator when you have collaboration. So thank you. Do we have any questions? Would anybody like to, has anybody got any wonderings? Let's see what's happening in the chat.
I'd love to just jump onto what you said, Chiara, in terms of, you know, the doors being closed, because that's one of the main things that drove me as well for that desire and that thirst for open doors, and to experience and really enjoy that open door philosophy or idea. You know, especially when you're young in teaching, and those earlier teaching days, you're never sure if you're doing everything right. You come to school, and sorry, just let me close the door. You come to school and you're kind of new. Everything is new. Your ideas are new. You try to get as much as you can from your colleague, and then when their doors are closed, you wonder, oh, am I doing the same thing as them? Is it okay? Is what I'm doing okay? And you don't really know until you get some kind of feedback from the parents, and that they're happy, or they're satisfied with what's happening with their child. But that comes back to you so slowly. And so the open door for me was an opportunity as well to learn from veteran teachers, to learn from teachers that come with so many cultural backgrounds and with so many different ideas, that it can only enhance your practice. And yeah, that's why I came up with that word, that enhanced collaboration, because we collaborate, right? And if you're a PYP school, you know, collaboration is one of the standards. We have to actually like nail it. But I think there's an enhancement to make in that as well, in terms of that there's a level of, you can enhance that trust level, you know, you can wind it up a little bit.
So one of the questions that Vivian has is, how can we allow students to access all the adult talents and skills? And can you give a specific example of activity for this to happen?
So in the setting that I experienced, we had, and I know some people on the call who actually experienced that with me, but we had the idea, and it was all trial and error, right? But we had the idea to have each unit of inquiry in one of the classrooms. So we agreed as a team who would set up which unit of inquiry in their teams. That way the students could actually really open up to exploration and play, and hence the idea of responsive inquiry, right? We felt that if we're trying to work with one unit at a time, right? You're doing, for example, you're doing who we are, and we're learning about the body, and we're learning about how we grow. We're learning about, you know, changes from being a baby to being a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, or 6-year-old. But, you know, another child might just be interested in planet or in science. And we had another kid who was really interested in, like, he was looking in these books, history books, where he was looking at suits of armor and things like that. Why would I then restrict his desire and his interest by saying, no, right now we're going to be learning about, you know, growing and changing, and all things we think of doing when we're doing the unit, who we are. So one way, I guess, was to make sure that that children had access to all the different ideas, and that they could truly explore whatever they were interested in. We had the idea to have all units running concurrently, and each teacher took on the responsibility to set up their environment, one room within the theme, and that way the children could access all of the different areas. But the adults in the room then was, if we saw, if a child, say on my class list, nobody owned their class list, basically. Your class list, or your classroom list of students, is basically your performer. It's so that the children have, or that the equitable work ethical behavior, right? It's so that everybody has a responsibility to make sure that children have documentation. So I had my list to really check off, okay, when I looked at their story parks, logs, has everybody had a story written about them? Has everybody have they achieved the ATL skills and things like that? So I was responsible for my list of students to make sure all of their developmental checklists were being somehow documented. And that's what we could bring as well to the table during our collaborative planning meetings about when we had planning meetings about students, when we had meetings to talk about child development. We could share what have we seen from the children that have come and visited our classroom, what have their interests been, how have they been developing in certain areas of interest, and to make sure that the colleague who had that child on their class list knows about it. I would do the writing. I would write about every child that comes in my room, developmental story. Usually a lot of it happens in group work, but you might have the odd student where it's just a one-on-one experience, but the child might not be in my class. I had, for example, I love to play the guitar in the classroom, so I would play the guitar. In another classroom, she loved to just do music on videos, or using the proscenium board or the overhead projector. In another class, she was really, there was lots of yoga happening. So there was lots of ways to invite students to explore those kinesthetic ideas of learning, at the same time as being as accessing all the different adults in the space for different reasons and wherever their interest was.
I think you've answered.
Yeah, and bringing those conversations back to the collaborative planning meeting when we talk about the development of the kids.
Thank you. I think you've answered one of the questions, which was how do you record the academic progress? So what I'm hearing is that everybody is responsible for everybody, but you were checking off and making sure that nobody fell between the cracks.
Mm-hmm.
Gloria wants to know, how do the parents take the no walls between classes? I assume there were still walls. It was a metaphor. Can you expand?
Yeah. Well, in the actual my first experience where I actually did remove the walls, there were no walls. There were no walls, and we joined the classes together. And again, that took a little bit of parent education, a bit like Aga spoke about in her session earlier. You know, there was always parent education involved in some way or form. But again, it also depends on the culture you're in. And I think the culture that I was in at the time, they were okay with that. They were open to that, right? I know that
the environment.
Sorry?
How many children were in the environment? Can you give us an idea? In
the first one that I had, I think we had about 40. Yeah, about 40 kids. Okay. And the bigger environment that we actually had 6 classrooms together. So we were over 100 kids at the end. Now that wasn't the second environment where we had the 6 combined classes. Those had classrooms and those had doors, but we had a massive big piazza in the middle where students the doors were open and kids could flow in and out and through. There was always a class set up, or a teacher responsible for setting up the piazza space with provocations, and we took turns in setting up that space and what that could look like. And so the kids could flow in and out and through all of the rooms and spaces. But again, back to the parents, it is parent communication, and honestly, both experiences, there was good to no pushback at all. In the second experience with the 6th class, and there was 0 pushback, 0.
Winifred is asking, and I suppose we all are, a lot of us are locked down now, so how can we practice this enhanced collaboration in our present conditions of being online and working in bubbles?
Good question, and I actually was assuming that would come up. I want to actually throw that question out to you. first, but I do want to express or emphasize that it's not just about the responsive inquiry part that makes it work. It's the mindset that makes it work. And if you want it to work, you can make it work. And then look at, well, where are the limits? Where are the barriers? Or where are the restrictions that I have based on COVID or the pandemic right now, or any kind of pandemic? This might not be the last pandemic we have, right? So moving forward, what might that look like? Where would we then have to build those boundaries in, or where are those restrictions that we have to look at? But I think if we have that initial mindset that, okay, we're all in this together, how can we make that work? We will find a way. So, I mean, that for me, that question is open to everybody else as well, in terms of what that looks like. And in some schools, I know that have practiced this. There are, you know, you do have to probably go back to the classroom. I know that in the very beginning, when the lockdown initially happened, it went straight back to almost didactic learning, right? Everybody sucked straight back out into their classrooms. The doors had to be closed. We had to have minimal contact between each other. All the toys had to be disinfected every day. All the soft toys, we had to eliminate all of the carpets, all the cushions, all the soft toys, everything out of the room. It was almost complete alien to everything we know about responsive inquiry and play-based learning. And so, I mean, that of course happens in any setting. So it's not just something that needs to be adapted to this type of setting. It was an adaptation to everything, to the whole way we work. So I think the question is, how could it look like? What could it look like? Because what I've described is something that would be in what some might call old normal, ideally. But what would that look like in this new normal setting, with the mindset of trust, that trusting collaboration and equitable workload and equitable work behavior? I'd love to hear your ideas.
Something that Adam mentioned that we could discuss also in the breakout rooms is what do we think that are common barriers to trust in schools, and what leads to mistrust and can be easily reversed, right? So that might be something that we might want to discuss, Kira, maybe?
Sure. Absolutely, I think that would be great. And I know if it's the Adam Hill that I'm thinking of, then there's also that's a great opportunity for design thinking, isn't it? So, you know, when you have a problem, how could you design, what would that look like? And this is a great time to practice that as well, to think about that through that lens.
Great. So I'm going to stick everybody in a room. Juan Carlos, how many rooms? 6?
I already opened them, so people just.
Oh, you're going to create them. Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, that's one less thing I have to do. So yes, so in these more intimate environments, you have a even better chance to ask the questions and burning questions you may have. So Juan Carlos is going to whisk us away and see who we meet. Yes. So does anybody want to share anything from the breakout room? Anything they learned or would like to share with the group? I see some familiar faces here. Anna, are you getting lots of information?
Yes, I definitely am. And sharing with colleagues here, and happy to learn that I'm not the only teacher who's like just starting to implement IB. So yeah, this really helps, and this really motivates to see you all, like so inspiring. And yeah, thank you so much. Yeah,
I think people can be a bit scared by the word PYP and IB, but at the end of the day, it's best practice, isn't it? It's
exactly
right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just wanted to like to share quickly what we talked about in our breakout room, and I think that something that I will take with me is the idea to when we switch from content-based to concept-based approaches, just to look at the children first when they come into my class and see what they need actually, like to make this like pre-assessment of their skills, of the knowledge, and where can I help with content or with skills. And yeah, so thank you so much.
Not at all. Anybody else want to share? Elaine, one thing I wanted to say to you about your initial talk was something that really resonated with me. I worked in one school where I went into a free flow that was already organized and set up beautifully, and we're all on the same page. Brilliant. And then another school where I went and I wanted to emulate what I'd learned and got a bit of resistance. And communication obviously is key. But what I liked about what you said was there's adjustments and growing pains when you're trying something new in a school. And I think it's really important to remember that you need to take risks to learn and to grow. And sometimes it doesn't work and it's back to the drawing board, and that's okay. That, you know, taking risks is how you get better.
Yeah. And I can there's a whole nother story to that. And I can tell you that yeah, it's not, even though I've experienced it in two different schools. The first school was where I just really set it up and wanted to, you know, I explored that idea. I told you it came from a motivation that I was told what to do, and I had this restriction, and then looked into what it could be. And then the second time around, it was, wow, this great experience that I could really, I don't know, it was just great to experience that it really, really works. And it hits and on all of the parts of me, that it resonated with all of the parts of me that said, this is what school could be like. And not just for early years. I mean, I was in an early years setting, but I believe this can be for other grade levels as well. When you think about, I don't know, Studio 5, some of you might have heard of in Vietnam. I know that in Laos, in a school that I worked in, the third graders, the whole grade level, I think there was 3 classes at the time, they worked extremely well and collaborative together, where they were able to hone in on student development and everything, and share the workload between the 3 classroom teachers and the instructional assistants. They were able to differentiate in ways impossible if you were just your closed door, your closed classroom, right? All of a sudden you had 6 teachers available to do the workload for those 3 classes, as opposed to just having 2 teachers for one small group of kids. And the other thought, just joining on to your comment, Chiara, was I then tried to replicate this to the next school that I joined, and it went terribly wrong. I was actually the head of department at that point too, and it just didn't work. And again, that's why I say it's about the mindset. If we can establish that mindset and that trust, and understand and have a common philosophy, then we can start working on it. And honestly, when I tried to implement it and it went terribly wrong, I ended up having to really stop everything. I just had to say, okay, everybody just go back to doing what you're doing, do what you feel is best, find your comfort zone back again, and we'll take it slowly. And then I did workshops. I think we ran about 5 or 6 consecutive workshops each week to help us, first of all, come to a common understanding. And the first workshop was all about, what do we actually believe about childhood education? What is going to be our foundation here? And it turns out, you know, what was great is that in their closed doors, people are doing those. I could see, because I could go into all of the classroom, and I could see that those teachers all had the same philosophy, but they didn't know that from each other. They actually don't know that. Just talking at a water cooler doesn't give you that insight. But as we workshop together and put our sticky notes together to my reflective questions that I chose for them, that's when we could see that we actually all do have a common understanding. And once we had that foundation set, then we could start developing ideas on how can we then move forward and open doors and look at making this work within the context that we were in. And then
I think Nora has a burning question for you. Nora, did you want to ask something? Nora?
Yes, actually, I do. I'm still trying to climb out of my box and think a bit more broad. I was wondering, these open door classrooms, do they happen only on the same grade level, or could it be happening in the whole EYP? Like for example, we have 3 EYP classes. Mm-hmm. We have the 3-year-olds, we have the 4-year-old, and we have the 5-year-olds. So would you suggest to do an open classroom in this setting, or do you do it across just in one grade level?
Again, that would be something I think you would have to agree on as a team, and look at what really works within your context. So I would always suggest let's open it up first and see how the children respond to it. Or you can take it from a step-by-step approach and say, okay, let the 3s and 4s first together, or the 4s and 5s first together, and have a look how what learning takes place in that space and within the space and the times that you have available. I mean, it will also be based on some of the resources you have available as well, right? Space and physical resources and the people. Again, it's a discussion with your team, and if you can agree on what that might look like, then just try it. It's trial and error, it really is.
We've done it with buddy classes. Henk, do you want to talk about your experience with buddy classes? You still there?
Yes, I'm still there.
Hi, Henk.
Okay. Hi, Elaine. I do, but yeah, I love body class. But I prefer to have a specific focus when I do body class. So it still can be very play-based, but it's helpful, especially when you involve all the kids, to give them some direction, what they need and what they want. And that's what Elaine mentioned. That's a conversation with your body teacher at the coffee table for 5 minutes, and then up you go. Yeah.
But Henk and I worked together in Vietnam, and Henk's buddy class was Studio 5, so grade 5. So yeah, so it can also work with older grade groups where they come down and read or work on a project together or help you out with your unit work, and they get something out of it as well. So everybody's happy. Nisha, thank you, Henk.
Yes. Sorry, just to continue with what Nora was asking, I just wanted to ask then, do you do it for one unit or do you do it for the whole year around? When you do this kind of breaking down the walls and working together?
For us, it was all year.
But then the units are different. If the units are different, then how do you go about with it?
So because we ran the units all concurrently. So yeah, I guess how did we set that up in the beginning is a good question. We looked at all of the units and set the initial elements of the unit were all fixed before the year started. So those central ideas, lines of inquiry, and concepts and related concepts were all set. And as we continued the year, we took one unit for each of our planning sessions. We took one unit at a time that we then focused on to fill in the remainder of the planner in terms of, well, what learning experiences could happen or could go into that room or went into that room. Sometimes it was retrospectively, right? Because because everything was run concurrently. We could also then, as we retrospectively filled the planner, and some of the things moving and planning forward, because your assessment is for, of, and as learning, right? So as we were filling those spaces in the planning, we could look at really what the children were interested in because they were doing it concurrently at the same time. So we could then develop it around the child's interests. And that's how we worked it. But in other schools, I think where you are just doing one unit at a time, it's quite possible as well, right? I always recommend, if you're doing it unit wise, and we're talking PYP again, sorry, but like your who we are and how we express ourselves units, I feel like they're units that can go all year. You can always be dipping back into them, right? And have those going all year, while the other units then are more of a focus thing where you can bring in then, okay, let's bring more sharing the planet in with that whole thing. Let's bring more where we are in place and time with their histories and things in to enhance those ideas of expression and developing identity.
Just a quick thing, David, before we went into the breakout rooms, David asked a question that might have happened to many of us in our schools. How do we best approach collaboration among colleagues who may not necessarily share the same vision, philosophies, and approaches? David, before, not only Elaine, but any other person who might have felt that they had encounter this problem. David, would you like to add anything to your question, or does that kind of wrap what you want to say?
No, I think I've kind of said most of it, but I guess it's again that kind of age-old thing of like old school content versus this kind of conceptual education. And then if you're working with teachers who are new to the PYP or teachers who have taught in the PYP for a long time and think they're teaching conceptually, and are kind of firmly of that belief, but don't necessarily then, I guess, like I said, just if they have different philosophies and a different vision of what that looks like on a day-to-day basis, and if it's not this collegiality that we're talking about right now, I guess. How do we approach that, and how do we break down those barriers and those walls?
Is there anyone here who has been successful in that, or somebody who has struggled a lot with that? Both ways would work in adding some.
I know someone did reply in the chat. I can't remember who it was now.
Johan.
Yeah, maybe Johan can tell us a bit more about it.
Sure. I mean, I'm not a PYP educator, but one of the things that I did was I had someone cover my class for a little bit and observe my colleagues, and I learned what they were strong in, and I could ask them about that. And then I invited them to my room and did the same thing. When you're vulnerable, open up the classroom and you're teaching, that is really important.
Yeah. Well, I've personally had experience in this, and I found with a colleague of mine in the past that even when like I would open up my room and stuff, they just don't listen. Like, it's like, oh, they've very tunnel vision and there's no like, and it's like, okay, you're not going to listen. So, and it's all like, you might give an idea and then that colleague might then like just doesn't listen, or might say that idea 2 weeks later, and it's just kind of all like, oh, they're tunnel vision. And I've definitely found I've struggled with that anyway.
I think you have to pick your colleague very wisely, in that, like, our school gave us golden tickets, like what you were saying, which is your golden ticket you could give in and ask for release time to go and observe somebody that you feel you could learn from. So I feel if you have a colleague where you think, wow, like inspirational, I want to go and see what they do, and maybe you could ask your admin for that golden ticket to go and observe, and vice versa.
Yeah.
There was something that I saw at a school in the Netherlands. I think it was the International School of Utrecht. They had in their staff room, they had a picture of everybody. And then at the beginning of the year, they could choose what they were very, very interested in and very, very passionate about, and also what they wanted to know more about. So if you just go into, as a new teacher, somebody who was there for a day for a shadowing session, I already felt like I could actually go to somebody and I did and say, hey, can you tell me a bit more about how you approach play-based learning, how you approach assessment? And then that kind of gave newbies better understanding, like a helicopter view of the assets of your team, which are sometimes hidden in a way.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Great idea. Are we time, Juan Carlos?
I think we went over time with the conversation. But that's a good thing, I guess, right?
Always.
Well, I think it's because obviously everybody is very invested in what's been spoken about this evening, and I'd like to thank Elaine for talking about collaboration and the difference between cooperation and how important it is. And I think for myself, I did get a lot out of the conversations this evening. So thank you so much. And please use Twitter to follow each other and keep sharing ideas. And T-Shares have a Facebook page and are also on Twitter. So please sign up and keep sharing.